third session for senior thesis. Let me open up in a word of prayer. Gracious Heavenly Father, we're thankful for this time. We do thank you for the end of finals and for the work that's been done by the students. Just pray for diligence of teachers and work that they have now. Just watch over this time, peace and calm to the ones presenting, that you'd be with us. We ask all this in your name. Amen. Once again, I just want to thank you for being a great audience. Just continue to be an excellent audience for our speakers. And our first speaker is Hannah Webb, and she'll be introduced by Kenzie Stice. So please welcome Kenzie to the stage.
Good morning. So today I have the pleasure of introducing my best friend and someone who has been with me through every scary situation. Hannah Webb is one of the strongest and one of the most amazing people I've ever met. Though we have only known each other for 2 years, she feels more like a sister than she does a friend. I'm so proud of you. I can't wait to see what you do in the future. And she will be attending Del Mar to pursue a career in dental hygiene. Today she will be speaking to y'all about why we enjoy fear and controlled environments. So please help me give the warmest welcome to Hannah Webb.
Y'all can hear me? Okay. The lights are dim, swallowed by shadow. The sound is relentless and eerie as your eyes are glued to the screen. Your muscles coiled tight, anticipating the unseen. The flickering of lights expose a glimpse of a familiar room. Your stomach tightens as each flicker amplifies the dread. Then it happens. The screen erupts and the monster lunges out at you. You feel your stomach drop as a charge of energy flows through you. You snap back to reality and notice that you're still safe on the couch and your once full bowl of popcorn is now on the ground. This is an experience of controlled fear. Psychologists define fear as a protective primal emotion that evokes a biochemical and emotional response. Fear alerts us to the presence of danger or the threat of harm, whether the danger is physical or psychological. This thesis delves into why, as humans, actively seek the enjoyment of feeling fear in a controlled environment. The human response to fear is not just a mere accident, but a design from God. God knows every unexpected fear you'll encounter in your life, and He has placed every human with a system to respond to these situations. We are reminded of this in 1 Corinthians 12:18. But now God has arranged the parts, each one of them in the body, just as He desired. This tells us that God's design for the human body was purposeful, including giving us a response to fear. This topic will argue that the enjoyment of controlled fear is not a morbid fascination, but a testament to the intricate, inspired systems that allow us to explore and even master our innate impulses. There are many variants that go into this, including physiological, psychological, and social factors. But before we go into things any further, it is crucial for everyone to understand the fundamental aspects of fear, including the underlying science of fear, the sensation of physical fear, and the impact of psychological fear. By establishing an understanding for these topics, we can then use this information to help explore and understand why we are drawn to such fear while going into individual differences. Lastly, we can learn the applications for beneficial uses, including exposure therapy. As a result of setting this groundwork, we can now move forward into unraveling the human fascination of enjoying fear in a controlled environment. The first topic I'd like to introduce is the underlying science of fear. Let's look at the biological response to fear by understanding why and how our bodies use the fight and flight system to react. We can then discuss the neurochemicals like dopamine and endorphins and how they affect the brain. The fight or flight response, also known as the acute stress response, refers to the physiological reaction that occurs when in the presence of something mentally or physically terrifying. This response is triggered by the release of hormones that prepare your body to either stay and deal with the threat or run away to safety. There are 3 stages that occur during this fight or flight mechanism: the alarm state, the resistance state, and the exhaustion state. The alarm state is the first and occurs when the danger is actively happening. In this state, your central nervous system is ramped up while the body flows with adrenaline, causing the heart to beat faster. This was preparing you to fight the danger or flight from it. The second state is the resistant state and occurs after the danger has happened. This is a state where your body attempts to recover from the extreme levels of threat that have just occurred. While your body attempts to recover a steady heart rate, it will still remain on high alert. The last and final state is the exhaustion state. It happens after prolonged stress. The body can start to feel exhausted and break down due to chronic stress occurring repeatedly over time. Moving on to the fight or flight mechanism, the next biological response to consider is the role of endorphins and dopamine in the brain. But what is dopamine and what are endorphins? Dopamine is a neurotransmitter made in your brain. It plays a role as a reward center and in many body functions, including memory, movement, motivation, mood, attention, and more. Compared to endorphins, which are hormones that are released when your body feels pain or stress. They are produced in your brain and act as messengers in your brain. Endorphins are produced to help relieve pain, reduce stress, and improve mood. Now, what do these biological responses have to do with fear? Well, being in the state of fear, your body will experience an adrenaline rush. During this, your body releases adrenal glands to the brain. This is what will produce endorphins and dopamine. However, the fear from horror movies and roller coasters is different from fear of life-threatening situations. So what is the comparison to real fear? How does controlled fear differ from actual life-threatening situations? Controlled fear comes from things like scary movies or skydiving, and are purposely being done in a controlled environment by someone who craves a sense of fear, while life-threatening fear is a reaction from the body when it senses real-life danger. This brings us to the end of the topic, and I can now move on to physical fear. This topic introduces the mechanisms behind roller coasters and the thrill of physical fear. Under this topic, I'd like to cover the engineering behind roller coasters, physical fear itself, risk perception of feeling safe despite the intensity, and the social aspect. Let's jump into the engineering aspect of roller coasters. When you feel a constant force and undergo a constant acceleration, things seem under control. But when the force suddenly changes size or direction and you accelerate unexpectedly, you subconsciously sense danger. The element of surprise on a subconscious level generates an existential flirt with death. Going further into engineering of roller coasters, you notice that some rides are exciting for reasons like how high it drops or how fast it goes. However, the most thrill-seeking rides are the ones that are rapidly changing and throwing unexpected forces on you. Gravity is a primary factor when it comes to roller coasters, and is what gives you the stomach-dropping sensation. For reference, our bodies on the ground are experiencing a standard 1G. Our bodies on roller coasters can experience up to 5 Gs. Gs simply just stand for the unit of gravitational force. While our bodies are usually able to handle the effects from 5 Gs, it can deprive the brain of oxygen, resulting in lightheadedness, dizziness, or at times blacking out. The slow, steady climb, along with the rhythmic clink, 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 pulling you higher and higher off the ground. The only view ahead is where the track ends and the sky meets. This leads you to the internal question of when will it end? This is anticipation. You're excited to see what comes next, and you're building up to the unexpected drop. However, amidst the frightening moment, we still feel an underlying sense of safety, which points me to my next topic. This leads into risk perception and why we feel safe despite the intensity. Sense of safety can come from having a sense of certainty or having a sense of control. When things become too boring and predictable, we seek excitement and we find something else that we can predict. For example, roller coasters. The sense of safety, despite the intensity, could come from knowing that there are so many rigorous safety standards amusement parks have put on roller coasters. Features like the anti-rollback system will stop the roller coasters from rolling back on an inclined hill. In addition, roller coasters have a block brake system that makes sure trains do not collide with each other on the track by using sensors. These sensors send information to the roller coaster's computer, and if an error is detected, then the ride will automatically stop. Having the roller coaster stop when it detects an error is actually what it's supposed to be doing, and is usually what we describe the ride as broken down, except it's not. It most likely needs to just be reset on a computer like any other piece of equipment. All these safety standards on roller coasters lead us to being able to enjoy a controlled sense of fear. The last thing I'd like to talk about under this category of physical fear is the social aspect and how it amplifies fear in a person. Sharing an adrenaline-rushing experience with someone only amplifies the amount of fun. Imagine waiting in line for a terrifying ride as you hear the distant scream sinking with every time the ride drops. This causes the anticipation to naturally follow. Even after the experience is over, you can share and compare stories, which can feel like you're reliving the moment all over again. Going further Going through an intense experience with someone creates memories, friendships, and special connections. Not to mention that a time of vulnerability is a strong bonding agent, as a feeling of sharing your humanity with someone is a deeper level of connection that you won't get anywhere else. In the end, engineering fear, risk perception, and social aspects all play crucial roles in displaying the thrill of physical fear. Now, one way we humans like to get scared is through horror movies. Horror movies are not scary because of what they say, but because of how they say it. They use techniques like jump scares, eerie music, blurry shots, and psychological tension to be able to manipulate your fear. Diving further into the kinds of techniques, there are things like lighting and sound that create an uneasy feeling. The light, when it comes to horror movies, usually focuses on the main character, leaving everything around them a mystery. Because of how dark and eerie they create the settings, face and objects get easily distorted, making it an intense, uneasy feeling. Sound is also another important factor when it comes to telling a suspenseful story. Imagine Jaws without its original legendary soundtrack. Sound and music play a big part in horror movie jump scares and are often just boring without music. When horror movies create a shock effect, such as jump scares, where you jump from fright, sound is typically a key element. Usually, the movie builds to the actual shock, which often consists of a non-diegetic, ominous music followed by a very loud sound when the actual shock occurs. When a loud sound is made, it is usually followed by dead silence or ominous music. This creates the fear of the unknown and adds the suspense of what's to be expected. To go even further from horror movies playing to the part of the fear of the unknown, I'll go into psychological tension. Horror movies create psychological tension by using hidden movements and shadows in the distance, which give the person watching a fear of what is to come next. Keeping the people guessing is what keeps them invested in the movie and eventually leads up to the shock of a jump scare. Now that I've explained in depth the thrill behind roller coasters and horror movies, we can compare them side by side, see the difference. The difference is psychological fear and physical fear. Roller coasters rely on physical fear factors such as gravity. However, horror movies use more psychological factors such as jump scares. We see the clear divide of psychological tension versus the physical sensation. Now, why is it that some people love the sense of thrill while others plainly just hate it? Some people may be more prone to thrill seeking because of their low levels of dopamine, and due to this, they enjoy watching horror movies or riding roller coasters. Sensation-seeking individuals and extroverts will naturally gravitate to liking fear-inducing activities. It is commonly known that individuals who enjoy roller coasters or just thrill-seeking activities in general are most likely to be more open-minded and try new things. Some people like the scare of horror movies due to the catharsis and emotional release after it. A website I found states, psychologically, catharsis is viewed as a mechanism for emotional purging and self-discovery. Engaging in cathartic experiences enables individuals to confront, process, and release pent-up emotions, leading to the sense of relief and renewal. In the end, liking or disliking these types of activities really all just depends on the person and their traits. After explaining the reasons behind why some people love controlled fear more than others, I also must go into individual differences of fear. There are things like prior experiences that should be accounted for. People with traumatic experiences in their life could be affected more by fear due to the fact that they could associate unpleasant memories, leading them to dislike anything remotely scary. There are also things like age and culture that impact how you receive fear. For example, a little kid going to see it is going to be more scared watching a horror movie than a teenager. This is most likely due to the fact that the innocence of younger children often fear more things like monsters or the dark, but older children have a more abstract fear like social situations or real-world dangers. Culture can also affect how you respond to emotional stress, and what are the social norms of how you manage fear? Bringing all these factors of individual differences, we can understand how some people like controlled fear more than others. There are many different factors in tolerance for ambiguity and affect how people perceive and controlled fear. Using all the things we have learned so far through roller coasters and horror movies, we can now go in depth of the question of why. What are the reasons we love controlled fear? One of the reasons is due to the fact that it's a means of testing survival instinct. Thrill challenges our flight or fight response, as I mentioned before, and it makes us sharp and aware of any danger. This exercises our innate response. Now, as a means for emotional benefits, the sense of accomplishment and euphoria after conquering a fear-inducing activity can be another explanation on why we love controlled fear. The most obvious reason is due to the dopamine rush and the adrenaline, as I mentioned before. After you complete a thrill-inducing task, you'll get a sense of reward from the neurotransmitters sending a surge of dopamine to the brain. Endorphins also get released into the brain, which associate with the physical exertion and will help relieve pain and boost mood. The release of tension after facing a big fear can be powerful. It is one extreme to the other due to the difference between intense fear to complete release. This is what contributes to the euphoric feeling. Another big factor is self-efficiency. Being comfortable under pressure can boost one's confidence and eagerness to take on future challenges. People also put themselves under controlled fear to prove to themselves that the outcome was not as scary as anticipated. It helps balance someone's perspective and helps work over their anxieties. The final reason for why people enjoy controlled fear can be due to the social bonding that is involved and how shared fear experiences create special connection and memories. I mentioned social bonding early, but it is such a key factor in why people seek the sense of fear that I must repeat it. Using all this information on controlled fear, I can now go into the implications for a greater use. Controlled fear can be used and help understand the human body. For example, therapeutic uses of controlled fear, such as exposure therapy for anxieties and phobias. But what exactly is exposure therapy? Well, it's really exactly what it sounds like. A website I found states exposure therapy is a psychological treatment that was developed to help people confront their fears. This is useful for people who avoid their fears, which would help them short-term, but a long-term solution could be to break and reduce by exposing individuals. Exposure therapy has been scientifically used to help treatment for many fear-inducing problems, which include phobias, panic disorders, social anxiety disorders, obsessive-compulsive disorders, post-traumatic stress disorders, and generalized anxiety disorders. Some examples of this could be handling a spider if you have a fear of spiders, or talking in front of a crowd if you have a fear of public speaking. There are just a few small relatable examples. However, there are tactics for things like panic attacks or post-traumatic stress, also known as PTSD. For example, running in place to get your heart beat up to learn that the sensation is not as dangerous as it may seem, or bringing up a traumatic experience to release and reduce that feeling of pent-up anxiety. Knowing this, you might think to yourself, it's not as easy as it sounds, but there are tactics to help, including great exposure and systematic desensitization. Now, what is great exposure? Great exposure is when psychologists help the client construct an exposure fear hierarchy, in which feared objects, activities, or situations are ranked according to difficulty. They begin with mildly or moderately difficult exposures, then progress to harder ones. This makes it easier for the patient to work up to exposing their greater fears. Moving on to systematic desensitization. It is described as exposure combined with relaxation exercises to make them feel more manageable and to associate the feared objects, activities, or situations with relaxation. If you have ever read Brave New World, you'll see the comparison between death conditioning and systematic desensitization. If you have not read the book, death conditioning is when children at a young age are taught to see death as natural and normal. In fact, they are even brought toys and candy when they visit the hospital for the dying. And it worked. You can see the same thing happening here. People are bringing relaxation to their anxieties to desensitize from it. Systematic desensitization is a great way to manage over-excessive fear in needed cases. Believe it or not, bringing in virtual reality could be a big game changer for exposure therapy. Imagine having a fear of flying and being put into a virtual reality flight simulator. Knowing you're in a safe room, but having that realistic fear of flying would be a great tactic for overcoming that fear. This is just one example, but there are many other uses for virtual reality and exposure therapy. Exposure therapy can introduce and help a patient to learn to attach to more realistic ideas about feared objects, experiences, and situations. Now, to bring this all together, the human fascination with controlled fear through the lens of psychological, physiological, and social factors reveal the divinely intricate design of the human body. Our innate response to fear, far from being a mere accident, allows us to protect ourselves from genuine danger, along with using fear as a means of pleasurable and beneficial uses. The means of adrenaline, dopamine, endorphins, horror movies, roller coasters, and so on tap into the fundamental aspects behind fear. Furthermore, the individual differences in how we enjoy fear highlight the diversity of human experience, shaped by personal history, age, and cultural context. Ultimately, our inclination to seek out controlled fear is a testament to our capacity to explore, understand, and even harness our primal instincts given to us by God. As demonstrated, we can use controlled fear in therapeutic uses as a great tool for growth, resilience, and overcoming the very anxieties that hold us back. So, I'll end with this. The human embrace for controlled fear should not be only to confront the shadows, but to dance within them, surfacing with a deeper understanding of ourselves and our Maker. Thank you.
Good job, Hannah. This was one of the topics I was most interested in hearing about, because this is a You're taking on an interesting topic. Before we get into that, I'd like to introduce our judges. Travis Lockyer, head of school, John Riley, who has 2 daughters here at the school, and Katie Barger, who has her 2 daughters here as well. So my first question has to do with if somebody was to critique your thesis, what's your thesis, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm just trying to oversimplify, is basically that seeking control fear can be good for you. A critique of that would be that actually that is a violation of the 6th commandment of do not murder. And the Heidelberg Catechism talks about, in explaining it, it's not only like hating, killing, insulting my neighbor, but it goes on to say that I do not harm myself nor willfully run into danger. So there's this broader context that I don't do anything that's going to harm myself or put myself into danger, and that when we start doing things with controlled fear and adrenaline rush and those kind of things, that we're actually pushing ourselves toward violating the 6th commandment, that we are to protect ourselves and not willfully run into any danger. How would you respond to a critique like?
If you're having irrational fears over things that should not be feared over, you might have a fear of public speaking, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't public speak. If you're fearing these things, you're having your focus on things that you should not be having your focus on. So coming over those fears that are holding you back would be able to focus your fears on the wrath of God or the evil in the world. So overcoming those fears would be beneficial to you. And as means of harming yourself, you're harming yourself by not focusing on God, correct? So focusing on something else that is fear-inducing to you would harm yourself more than coming over those fears and focusing your fears on the wrath of God or evil, so on.
Great, thank you. One of the genres you mentioned about is the horror genre, which currently I would say is quite debased. It has sexual content, it's violent. There's really very little, I guess, from my perspective, very little redeeming value in it. That it's really just meant to be kind of a desensitization. People would say it desensitizes you to violence, and it's adrenaline rush. It's very self-serving for the audience, and it's just a continuing kind of a spiraling kind of into a dark place. However, I'm curious if you think that genre of whether it's horror or scary movies, you talked about shadows, that genre of whether books, literature, movie, media, can that be redeemed for Christ? And if so, how or what would that look like, or how would that be?
So, can you repeat the question?
So can the horror, scary genre, which currently is, like I said, very, very debased, could that genre be redeemed for Christ? And if so, how could it, or what would that look like?
That is a good question. I'm not a horror movie maker myself, so I don't know how that would look like, but I do believe that horror movies, anything, could really point to Christ and give us a sense of what God does and what fears we should be looking at. And I think there could be horror movies like that, but as far as what it would look like, I wouldn't know.
Sure. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks, that was super interesting. Just for a point of clarification, is your assertion that we as people in controlled situations know, for you use the roller coaster analogy, we know that thing is probably not going to fall off the track, but our body reacts differently than if it were to fall off the track? My question is, does the human brain's ability to predict the future and knowing it's coming change the response? Is that what you were saying?
I think that for another example, if we watch a horror movie, we know that it's not real blood, it's fake. So I think having a sense of certainty in that way, we understand that we're okay, but it's still like roller coasters. You're still going up and down. You're still having that stomach dropping sensation. There is like physical aspects to that. So but yes, I understand what you're saying.
Okay, so then a second part two of that question is, why do you believe that we were created to have those two different ways of handling that? Why do you think we were instilled with that emotion or evolutionary, for lack of a better term, response to there's a tiger over there and that tiger is going to eat me versus there's a box over here with a tiger on it and it's going to jump and make noise and scare me? The reaction is somewhat similar. Why do you think the Lord did that? What value, I guess, is there in the television side of the thing?
Repeat your question one more time.
So I'm trying to get to the bottom from your viewpoint of if the brain can tell the difference between fake fear, I know that's not a real tiger, and real fear, I know that is a tiger, but my response is similar. Why does that exist? Why can't my brain just say, you know what, that's not real, I'm not going to pay attention to it? And is there a value in that to you?
Well, I think that goes more into having rational fears. Unlike having irrational fears like fearing a fake tiger or something. You're not having those irrational fears. I feel like He set into us to have some understanding of what is to be feared and what is to not be feared. Because if you don't have that contrast of something that's not as scary to something that is scary, how do you know what is scary if there is no contrast?
Okay.
Yeah.
And then one more question. I apologize, kind of doing three here, but emerging research in psychology is beginning to show that the human subconscious either struggles with or cannot differentiate between what we see and what we tell ourselves we see. With that in mind, is there using exposure therapy and so forth, are we actually doing more harm than good? Are we making our bodies relive the feeling that this monster's coming at us over and over again? Do you see a threat to that?
Yes.
I'm sorry, one more piece. For an otherwise healthy person, not an exposure therapy kind of person. For an otherwise healthy person, like you or me watching a horror movie versus someone who's trying to have psychological care to overcome some trauma or something like that.
I'm sorry, repeat the question.
Is there a risk for you and I as healthy people, since our subconscious perhaps cannot tell the difference between the fake and the real, to continuously relive this trauma over and over again?
So there are things, like I mentioned, that can help people with, like in extreme cases when people it's something mentally that they cannot come over. There are tactics that I mentioned, like maybe starting off small and then growing up to that fear. And if it is mentally, I believe at some point, if you're just doing that at day to day, doing what you fear the most day to day, at some point, you're not gonna fear that.
Yeah. Okay, super, thank you.
Okay, so at the beginning of your speech, you said you used the phrase underlying sense of safety when people are going on roller coasters. So my question to you is, how can believers apply that phrase to their own lives when we're afraid?
Well, ultimately, we know that He is our God, and if we know that He is our God and that's in our hearts, we're saved. And anything else on earth cannot compare to us being saved. So any fears that we have here on earth don't compare.
Okay, thank you. I'm interested to know a little bit more about exposure therapy. So in your research, can you provide any specific examples of people who went through exposure therapy, specifically perhaps virtual reality, and that helped them become successful in overcoming their fears?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would have to go into more research. I would have to look at people's stories and people's experience. I didn't do that in my topic, just for a shortened time. but I for sure can look into that.
Thank you.
Congratulations, Hannah. Well done. Thank you. We'll take a short break and get into our second talk, our second speaker. All right, if everyone could find their seats, please. If you're sitting in your house, our second speaker of this session is Chuck Brush. He'll be introduced by Jacob Segundo. Please welcome Jacob to this.
Good morning, friends and family. My name is Jacob Segundo, and today I have the pleasure of introducing a lifelong friend and a person, if anyone knows him well, someone who has a deep passion for weightlifting, physical health, and fitness. Chuck has played alongside me in football for the past 7 years, and having played football, I have watched him grow as he has learned discipline, perseverance, and leadership. Ever since we met in 4th grade, I always remember Chuck working out and lifting, which is why he has chosen this topic for you today. Chuck's goal is to inspire others to push their boundaries and embrace hard work and dedication, with his topic being the science of strength and longevity, how training and nutrition enhance lifelong health. After high school, Chuck plans on attending Del Mar College for an EMT program, eventually to join the RTFC, which is a firefight emergency group for the refineries. Please help me in welcoming up Chuck Brush.
Good morning. Picture this. You wake up feeling energized. You feel strong. You feel ready to tackle the day head on, whether it's playing with your children, performing physical tasks at work, or simply going for a walk in nature without the worries of pain and fatigue holding you back. This isn't something that should be extraordinary, but it's something we take for granted. Being able to enjoy these simple things are a product of a healthy lifestyle where nutrition and exercise are deemed necessary. In the age we live in, the pursuit of physical fitness and a healthier life has never been easier. With the ever-expanding knowledge on the internet and a boom of social media and other websites, the tips and tricks to physical fitness are clearly within our grasp. The days of trial and error and guessing on what works for physical fitness and what doesn't are gone. No more guessing what foods are good and what foods aren't. No more so-called secrets to weight loss. Fitness has never been easier, yet our modern society has never been more unhealthy than it is right now. Our society is one that promotes sedentary lifestyles, poor nutrition, and an acceptance of unhealthy habits. These societal norms lead to many problems, including obesity, lack of self-control, and the onset of many avoidable health problems, which negatively impact overall health and quality of life. By examining the science of training and nutrition, the prevention of diseases and obesity will be examined alongside the promotion of a long, healthy life. We will explore how training and nutrition not only prevent obesity, but how they can prevent other diseases and conditions. As humans, knowledge is easily accessible and in abundance. However, the idea of maintaining a healthy, capable body really comes down to one key factor: personal choice. Knowing the right steps to take towards fitness is beneficial, but only if those steps towards fitness are actually taken. The good thing about fitness is that no one can take it from you, which also means that no one will give it to you. Fitness is not a time-to-time phase or a trend at the moment in time. It's a lifestyle that must be upkept. Although the majority of the public is aware of this, our society has a big problem. Let's not sugarcoat it. America has a big fitness problem. We are now in an age where being overweight isn't just common, it's the norm. Estimates indicate that nearly 70% of all American adults are overweight, and 40% are clinically obese. Yet our society chooses to tiptoe around the topic by pushing for acceptance and body positivity, because they are more worried about offending people or hurting their feelings more so than they care about their health. It is undoubtedly your right as an individual to treat your body in the way you want to, which includes indulging in whatever foods you want. But make no mistake about it, pretending that it is harmless is delusional. Unfortunately, this has become a trend in America. The standard of healthy has changed drastically. We now live in a society where our self-image matters more than what is considered healthy. While self-worth has its place and is certainly important, it should by no means override the simple and honest truths regarding health that we know to be true. These problems stem from the culture around food. We need to change the way food is viewed. Food is viewed by the majority of Americans as something that should be super tasty and also convenient. When we view junk food as something that should be regularly indulged in, we lose sight of the ultimate purpose of food. The purpose of food is to nourish our bodies with the nutrients it needs to stay alive. Why should we take this for granted? Why does our culture overlook such a basic human necessity like proper nutrition? It is undoubtedly God-honoring to treat our bodies the way He intended us to, which includes eating healthy foods daily and not overindulging in junk food to the point of obesity or becoming overweight. Once we can change the way we view nutrition as a culture, then we can aim to achieve a healthier and ultimately better society. The American culture is all about convenience and consumerism, which promotes unhealthy diet choices. Societal norms have changed our diet values and ideas of what we call healthy. Common fast food restaurants load their foods with seed oils, refined carbs, and saturated fats, which all lead to inflammation and increased risk of heart disease and obesity. While it is okay to indulge in these things from time to time, regularly consuming these foods will lead to many avoidable health problems and obesity. We need to change the way we view junk food as a society. It should be seen as an indulgence that needs to be regulated, rather than a staple to the American diet. A way we can make a change as a society is by educating Americans in schools about diet and nutrition. Integrating knowledge about nutrition and physical fitness early in schooling can lead to a better understanding of how we can best treat our bodies. Familiarizing the youth with the importance of diet and exercise will lead to a new generation of healthy Americans and instill a sense of awareness regarding what they put in their bodies. Now, what does a health-promoting diet look like? Our diets should consist of nutrient-dense whole foods and minimize processed foods. Healthy fats such as avocados, nuts, and olive oil all promote improved cognitive function and heart health. Carbohydrates such as fruits, whole grains, and rice promote energy. Lean meats such as red meat, fish, and chicken provide proteins and amino acids, which promote bodily integrity and help repair damaged muscle tissue. With that being said, portion control is the main factor when it comes to weight loss or weight gain. Weight gain is simple. A caloric surplus is a direct cause of weight gain, which is when we eat more calories than we burn. A caloric deficit is how we lose weight, meaning we eat less calories than we are burning. This is the simplest way of explaining weight loss or weight gain. However, there is no shortcuts to beat it. Another problem we face as a culture in America is the constant search for shortcuts to fitness. Pills like Ozempic and other weight loss treatments lead to people constantly looking for shortcuts when it comes to weight loss. Whether that's taking Ozempic or getting weight loss surgery, statistics show these solutions are often ineffective in the long term. A study from JAMA Surgery examined patients who underwent bariatric surgery for 10 years following the operation. Weight loss was seen to be effective in the first year following the surgery. By the 10th year mark, 50 to 60% of the patients had regained the weight that they had initially lost. This surgery may be effective for short-term weight loss, but in the long term, it showed to be ineffective for about 50% of the patients. Why is that? Weight loss surgery is ineffective for many because people think that cutting their stomach in half will allow them to eat only half the portions they used to, thus promoting weight loss. What happens a lot of times is patients who underwent bariatric surgery is that they will continue with their old habits post-surgery and regrow their stomachs back to its original size. This becomes ineffective when discipline is disregarded. Similar to statistics are seen with Ozempic. A study published in The Lancet 2021 studied the effectiveness of Ozempic in the short term as well as the long term in terms of weight loss. Participants saw effective weight loss during the trial, with a reported 15 to 20% drop in body weight at the end of a 68-week treatment plan. However, once the use of Ozempic was discontinued, 50 to 80% of the weight that was initially lost was typically regained within 1 to 2 years. This happens because these treatments fail to instill discipline in the patients and don't solve the root cause of the problem. These are both short-term solutions to deeply rooted problems. Food is one of the most overlooked addictions, and it needs to be treated like an addiction. An estimated 107,500 Americans died from a drug overdose in 2023. An estimated 300,000 people died from obesity-related issues in 2023. This needs to be a wake-up call for America. Food is an addiction that kills more people each year than all drugs combined, yet we fail to see its role in this crisis. This is because nutrition is key to health and longevity. Nutrition is the foundation and base of health and should be prioritized as so. Our body requires energy to maintain homeostasis, meaning our body is constantly using nutrients to fuel every cell and organ in our body. Our bodies are constantly breaking down, going through the process of wear and tear. And the only way our bodies recover is through proper diet and adequate sleep. The essential nutrients we use for fuel are proteins, carbs, and fat. Proteins are the building blocks for repair and muscle recovery. They are essential for providing the body with integrity and support. Carbohydrates act as one of the body's primary source of providing energy. Carbohydrates are used to be broken down into glucose, which is responsible for providing energy to the muscles and to the brain, which is mainly fueled by glucose. Carbohydrates also regulate insulin, which is crucial to maintaining a healthy blood sugar level. Now, carbohydrates are unbeatable when it comes to providing the body with energy. However, the body will also use fats to provide energy as well. Fats are broken down and converted to energy in a longer process than carbs, which provides a more longer-lasting support of energy that is important for activities that may require energy over long periods of time. Fats also provide more calories than carbohydrates due to their dense nature. Fats contain 9 calories per gram, while carbohydrates and proteins only contain 4 calories per gram. While nutrition is extremely important and necessary, the best health benefits are seen when proper nutrition is paired with proper training and exercise. Now for aging. Aging is a normal process that everyone experiences as time goes by. With age comes the breakdown of the body, the natural process known as sarcopenia. Although aging is unavoidable, there are ways to reduce the unwanted effects that come with aging through a series of lifestyle factors. Understanding proper nutrition, physical activity, and the hormonal changes that come with age will help you navigate through the process of aging. Staying physically active is the best tool you can have to combat the aging process. The National Institute of Health found that older people who were regularly physically active, including walking and aerobic exercising, had a 35% reduction in all causes of mortality. The Harvard alumni study of 2008 closely followed a group of older men for many years to find out if exercising would indeed translate to a longer, healthier life. The study found that the men who regularly engaged in physical activity, such as walking or jogging, would go on to outlive their sedentary peers. The study would ultimately conclude there was a direct correlation between engaging in regular physical activity and a lower risk of dying from cardiovascular diseases, and ultimately translated to a longer and healthier life. Resistance training is especially important for older people. Losing the ability to do the things you used to be able to do can be discouraging. Resistance training combats the breakdown of important muscle groups that give the body mobility and function, which is important to maintain. Resistance training also promotes bone health, as weight-bearing exercise increases bone density, which is also important to keep. A simple bodyweight routine, 3 to 4 times per week, is the best way to combat things like osteoporosis and other conditions that may arise in elderly age. It can also help with protection from injury from falling. Keeping these functions into old age is the best way to prevent health conditions. Another point of fitness I think is important is how it is virtuous to treat our bodies as temples of the Holy Spirit. I believe that we can honor God by honoring the body he gave us. 1 Corinthians 19 says, "Do you not know that your bodies are temples of the Holy Spirit who is in you, whom you have received from God? You are not your own." God describes our physical bodies as temples of the Holy Spirit. Ephesians 4:15 and 16 says, "Rather, speaking the truth in love, we are to grow up in every way into him who is the head, into Christ, from whom the whole body, joined and held together by every joint with which it is equipped, when each part is working properly, makes the body grow so that it builds itself up in love." It is godly to make sure that we honor our bodies by taking care of ourselves physically and mentally. Indulging in too much food to the point of your health declining is defiling God's temple and goes against his commands. I want to stress this point because our culture is trying to be accepting unhealthy lifestyles and addictions. The American culture of body positivity is problematic and encourages unhealthy behaviors that force other people to simply accept it. The Bible addresses the topic of health in various ways, emphasizing both physical and spiritual health. There are many mental benefits to resistance training that go overlooked. Studies from the National Institute of Health show that engaging in resistance exercises regularly decreases the chances of anxiety and depression, which is also good for relieving stress. It has been proven that heavy or taxing workouts induce the release of endorphins and serotonin, which make you feel accomplished after a hard training session. Endorphins are good because they have been shown to have a positive effect on relieving anxiety and symptoms of depression. The mental health benefits don't stop at that. Resistance training also can improve your self-image and improve your confidence. Regular resistance training has also been shown to regulate other neurotransmitters such as dopamine, which influence our emotions and overall well-being. Achieving new markers in training will translate to a healthier level of confidence, which extends to other aspects of our daily lives. Training your body to be healthy and capable is a practice of self-discipline that translates to other aspects of our lives, not just physically, mentally as well. Discipline is doing something that is necessary to maintain order in our lives. Disciplining ourselves to be physically active will mentally prepare us for other challenges that we may face in life. If we constantly pressure ourselves physically, our minds will be conditioned for challenges, making everyday activities and challenges easier to deal with. Another important thing that resistance training promotes is healthy hormone levels. High-intensity training, primarily weightlifting, as well as sprinting, is known to promote a short and long-term increase in total testosterone levels and HGH, or human growth hormone. Testosterone is the hormone that plays an important role in men's sexual health, muscle growth, bone density, energy levels, and metabolism. Human growth hormone is a hormone that helps repair damaged tissue, increases bone density, and promotes muscle gain. By regularly engaging in high-intensity training, your body will release more of these hormones that promote health. Another lesser-known benefit of resistance training is that exercise is also shown to increase insulin sensitivity. Insulin is a hormone we have, with its primary function being to aid the cells in the absorption of glucose. This leads to an improvement in metabolic health, which regulates blood sugar healthily. Another factor that will come with resistance training is increased muscle mass, which ties into metabolic health on an important level. The more muscle one has, the more calories they burn at rest. This is due to the fact that muscular tissue requires more energy to maintain than fat. Muscles are metabolically active and burn more calories at rest than fat does. But training itself is a discipline, which benefits not only the body but the mind. Discipline is doing what you know is good, whether you feel like it or not, because you know the long-term benefits rise above the short-term struggle. Understanding this perspective can help motivate us to push through feelings of doubt. Now, motivation is one thing, but discipline rises above motivation. Motivation is a general desire to do something because you feel like doing it. Discipline is putting in the work regardless of how you feel about it, because you have mental control over how your feelings will dictate your actions. Understanding the benefits that come from these challenges should be motivation enough to work actively to become the best version of yourself that you can be. The knowledge and truths about fitness are clear. Strength training and proper nutrition are not just tools to look a certain way, they are essential aspects of extending the quality and quantity of this short life we have been given. As research expands, as well as the scientific literature, the importance of this lifestyle becomes clearer every day. I now encourage those who have heard me to take what has been learned to heart and do the best you can to become the best version of yourself. Stay strong in faith, in body, in mind, and in spirit. Never stop fighting. Thank you.
Good job, Chuck. So my first question has to do with, you mentioned that there is a connection as society has gotten more modern, its obesity rates continue to rise. So post-industrial revolution, rise of technology age, people become less active, eat more, and with the obesity, you mentioned that fitness has never been easier, but I would argue that it's actually it seems more confusing. You had, when I grew up, it was food pyramid, now it's my plate. All these different diets. It was the South Beach diet, now carnivore and no carbs or all carbs. All of this stuff from the experts are just getting bombarded, and there's a lot of confusion. As the society continues to evolve with technology and science, it seems like it would make sense then for society to just look to science and technology we've got some medication now. They mentioned, I think, Ozempo or whatever that helps with weight loss. Maybe it's not working great now, but give it time. Eventually the scientists will figure out something where we can rely on that to help our health. Why not just as a society just continue to look for better, more innovative, more progressive ways to solve the health crisis than to do things like go to the gym and lift weights?
Well, I think that these short-term solutions are often ineffective in the long term because the root of the problem will not be fixed with a pill. I guess, can you read the second part of that question?
Yeah, it's just why would we continue to do kind of old-fashioned ways of staying fit versus why look to science and modern technology to fix the problem for us?
Well, I also think that it's a discipline, and with that, that challenge of being physically fit comes discipline, which extends past looking a certain way, or I feel like it just extends to all aspects of life, and the benefits of confidence and just general feelings of well-being. I don't know how you would necessarily get that from taking a pill. Because me personally, I would feel more proud if I built up a physique, naturally, than if I had intervention from a pill or some synthetic hormones. And also, I don't exactly know how healthy something like Ozempic would be long-term. With anything that has upsides, probably has downsides.
Sure. Yeah, great. You mentioned about just being healthy. It's a term, but I'm curious by what standard is there an objective standard of health? Because health seems to be a culturally defined term. Even, what's healthy, what we consider healthy in America today in the 1950s was a different definition, and in Europe is a different definition. Africa is a different definition. Is there an objective definition of health, or is it just a culturally defined term?
Right. I think that health has a range, so to say, because. Can you repeat that?
Yeah, is there an objective standard of health that all people, societies can be held to, or is it just something that each society defines for themselves?
I think to an extent, each society defines it for themselves, but there is a general understanding throughout every civilization of health. There's obviously a range of healthy, and we know when it goes from healthy to severely malnourished. People will realize if you're severely overweight, you can tell. And I guess a general sense of health would be being able to perform daily physical tasks that are normal, that everyone should be able to do, such as driving, walking down the grocery store. Just being able to enjoy these simple things, I think, is the standard of health that should be upkept.
All right, thank you.
Thanks for that. Over the course of, to Mr. Lockyer's point about the Industrial Revolution and the creation of processed foods over the portion of the latter half of the 20th century, in spite of the fact that we are way unhealthier than we were, our life expectancies are still increasing. So to me, that's a bit of a delta saying of we're unhealthy, but we're living longer. Is your statement that even though you're living longer, it's not a positive life? Is that what you're trying to say of, you're looking forward to, well, you could live to be 80 years old, but you're not going to have a good last 10 years? Is that kind of where you're going there?
Well, no, I would say that the reason that the life expectancy has gone up so much is just the invention of modern medicine. Okay. You see people dying from things nowadays that are a lot of the times obesity related. Mm-hmm. That's something we really didn't see much, like you said, during the Industrial Revolution. We saw more deaths with diseases and like workplace accidents and just like other kinds of stuff. But this is sort of a newer problem that we face now.
Okay. And then in your opinion, is diet and lifestyle, do they have to go hand in hand, or can you do one or the other? And I base that question on, in many cases, diet is, to your point, a choice, and it's also a necessity of many people can't afford good food, right? They have to eat, the inexpensive food that is provided to them, and they don't have the luxury of that. Can they still be healthy even though they don't have a good diet by overcoming with lifestyle?
You mean, can they still be healthy with like a low budget for diet?
Sure. Like, for example, you go to the store,
Right.
Fruits and vegetables are expensive, and, TV dinners are cheap. McDonald's is cheap,
Honestly,
but fruits and vegetables are expensive.
I think that excuse is kind of not applicable nowadays because, like, a normal healthy meal. No, this is objective for me.
Okay.
Rice, either frozen chicken or eggs, like, it really isn't expensive.
Okay.
Like, in terms of if you're going to go to McDonald's and get a $12 meal, you can get a bag of rice for $4 that'll last you 15 days. You can get a carton of eggs that will be $6, if I'm not wrong. I don't know. Mm-hmm. I think it's like about $6 for a dozen eggs.
It's a lot cheaper now, but yeah, it was $6 for a while.
We'll see.
Yeah, that's a wider conversation.
Yeah, I've heard that argument before, and I sort of don't agree with it. I think it's pretty easy to get a hold of nutrient-dense foods.
Okay, awesome. You're going to do great in college, by the way, with your way you buy food.
Thank you.
Hey, Chuck, I'm going to kind of tag on to what John was saying. This subject is very near and dear to my heart as well. I tell my daughters frequently, you have one body that God gave you, so let's eat wisely.
Right.
However, we can afford food. And I know that I just heard your opinion on that, but my argument is my family moved here from an extremely poor state last year. And frequently at the grocery store, I would be behind people in line with multiple children with food stamps. How do you, one, increase awareness in lower income families who are trying to provide just minimal food on the table every day? How do you increase awareness to them to go to the store versus McDonald's? And then two, how do you combat the issue of, yes, rice might be cheap, but when you're looking at a family of maybe up to 10 people, I mean, John comes from a family of 11, how do you say, hey, let's go buy 24 eggs? Can we afford that? 2 dozen, I know 24 eggs is a silly thing. 2 dozen eggs, how do you buy, and then if you're working a minimum wage job on top of trying to feed your family, how do you have the time and the inclination to stop and try to figure out how to feed your family healthy when you're just exhausted when you come home at the end of the day?
I'll go back to your point on the food stamps. I do recognize that food stamps nowadays, they don't have necessarily great options for nutrition. A lot of the stuff we see on food stamps is junk food, chips and soda and stuff. But I think by changing the way food stamps are given out, so you can only buy, well, maybe not only, but they should have healthier options on the food stamps if that's a problem. Yeah, we need to be more aware of what exactly our society is being fed with when it comes to low-income families. What was the second part of your question?
I have no idea.
I think you said when it comes to low-income families providing food for a lot of people. That is something that I don't have a solution for. It just seems like another problem to tackle, but I do see the problem there.
Yeah, and I don't know that there is, honestly, an answer to that question. It's a huge problem, and it's a complex problem. You also mentioned discipline is disregarded. You said discipline rises over motivation, I think. So it's kind of like discipline first, motivation first, then discipline. So from a spiritual aspect, if you are disregarding discipline to protect your physical bodies, how does that come into play in trying to protect your spiritual bodies? Where's the danger there?
You say disregarding discipline?
So if you're disregarding discipline in terms of keeping your physical body safe,
Okay, yes.
do you assume that you're also disregarding discipline in keeping your spiritual self safe? How do those things play together?
I think there can be an overlapping of those two things. Like, taking care of our bodies should be one of the most important things to us, besides from God and family and other things like that. But wait, can you reword that?
Yep, I'm asking you,
Okay.
how do you maintain discipline in your physical body and your spiritual self? And if you don't have discipline in one of those, are you maintaining discipline in the other, or are they constantly the same?
Oh no, I think they go hand in hand.
Okay.
So if you're undisciplined with your body, you probably will be to some extent undisciplined with your mind, because whatever's in our mind usually manifests in the way we act and do things. So if your mind is cluttered, then you're not going to be acting with the best disciplines regarding your physical life. I think those two go hand in hand very importantly. And disciplining yourself physically, also, there's a mental aspect of that. It's not easy to train hard, but when we do it, we know there's a benefit that outweighs this short-term struggle. So I think this idea of discipline is very important for dictating how we let our feelings control us rather than, acting on however we feel, because that would not be a good idea.
All right, thank you.
Good job, well done, congratulations.
Thank you.
We'll take a short break, and the only reason you should leave the chapel is to go to the bathroom. Otherwise, please stay in this so we can get moving to the last person. Thank you.
They've been open this whole time, but earlier.
Only if there's like noise issue.
He was on the phone and I don't know, he was being kind of
everyone could please find their seats. Make sure you go back to your house areas. All right, so this is our third and final speaker of this session. She'll be introduced by Briella Cruz. Please welcome Briella to the stage.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Briella, and I am honored to be introducing Grace. She'll be attending Dallas Baptist University to be studying nursing, and her topic is going to be about toxic feminism. So please help me welcome her on the stage.
Slay queen, yes girl, get it girl. These are common catchphrases that many women say today, especially on social media. But why are women today very fervent about their work suddenly, even excited to replace men in doing so? From commercials to billboards, more and more women are portrayed as the ambitious leader of the workplace and home. She doesn't have time to stay at home and cook and clean and watch the kids. That's dad's job now, right? When did this become the new normal? And can women's ambitions still align with God's values for the family? This transition didn't happen overnight. Even in World War II, women, especially in Europe and the United States, had to fill in holes left by drafted men. Mothers transitioned from making dinner to making machinery in a factory. After the war ended, many women and children were ironically well adjusted to life without a husband or father. They simply just learned to live on. The very people soldiers fought to protect were managing just fine without them, perhaps even better in some instances. Women became accustomed to the jobs previously occupied by men, taught to work like men, think like men, and in some occupations, dress like them. Such gradual ushering of change in women led to pants becoming unisex. With clothes becoming unisex, jobs did too. Notice how instead of referring to a male law enforcer as a policeman, saying police officer is more politically correct. An anchorman is now referred to as a reporter, a postman, a postal worker, and a fireman, a firefighter. This isn't to say women can't have a title in their jobs. Couldn't a female actor be called an actress? Or a firewoman instead of a fireman? Notice how a progressive movement from specific gender titles to ambiguous gender-neutral dresses has crept in. Women have sought to dominate traditionally male-driven occupations, disrupting the traditional order set by God. He could have had gender-neutral titles and pronouns, yet the Bible distinctly refers to God in the male person. God intended order in our world and wanted a hierarchy to be established. Hence, he refers to himself as male. Men and women are not equal physically. We are not like thing one and thing two, who are only unique by their names. We are unique in our occupations, personalities, and bodies, but we are all made by the same God to bring honor together to him. Since we have free will, we have strayed away from God's will. Yet if God is still sovereign and led us as long as he has, why has toxic feminism even been an issue? It all goes back to the fall, specifically Eve. She was given a partner, one of her kind, a beautiful garden to live in, and the closest relationship possible with God. At any given time, she could go to God himself with anything she had on her mind. Still, she knew the boundaries God had set for her and Adam and weighed in her ambitions instead of consulting God. Adam was her husband and protector. Nevertheless, she discouraged him from his job by including him in her wrongdoing. Adam sinned too by accepting the fruit, but Eve initiated it. On to how masculinity has been affected today. Just take a look at the average commercial nowadays. Most diaper and laundry ones portray fathers at home doing average everyday chores and maintaining the home, such as using the dishwasher or changing diapers. In some instances, the mother is busily leaving for work or working from home. While these actions are perfectly normal, the people doing them are reversed. Now, there's nothing wrong with a father cooking a meal for his family. Neither is it bad for a mom to have a healthy balance between work and caring for her family. But with God-ordained roles given to glorify him and better ourselves, we have quite literally thrown things out of the balance. Taking some examples from media into account will help visualize this imbalance.
Take Victor Frankenstein for the book Frankenstein. He's a fantastic example of toxic masculinity. When the words toxic masculinity come to mind, the description of a ridiculously buff, brash, and assertive man does match a version of toxic masculinity. However, the complete opposite of said image can also be associated with toxic masculinity. A man who asserts his dominance, but feels out of place when doing it. Being self-conscious around other men who are more self-assured. Dismissing other people's input and relying only on themselves. Not too far off from Victor Frankenstein, oddly enough. In his tale, he devotes himself to studying philosophy, but cuts himself off from interacting with friends and family. He questions reality to the point where his life's purpose is to create an artificial life. Victor felt insecure and wanted the pride from an accomplishment by playing God in some sorts. Having a lack of control over himself, Victor wanted to control a life himself. Throughout the book, Victor is haunted by his instability of assertion versus submission. His lack of empathy for others leads to the death of multiple people via his own monster. Ironically, the monster has better reasoning than Victor, albeit he is terrifying, but can be collected at times, unlike Victor. Now, onto the more familiar stance on toxic masculinity. Gaston plays to the brash, buff, and controlling stereotype. He desperately wants to marry Belle, but time and time again is turned down by her. Not because he isn't good or strong enough, but Belle herself acknowledges that she doesn't deserve him. And Gaston wants Belle not for her wisdom or meek yet collected nature. He wants her because she's pretty. That's it. If that's the case, then why did he reject several other pretty women in the film who are constantly chasing after him? Because he has pride. Pride over claiming a difficult-to-reach prize. He is a hunter in the story, both symbolically and literally. The Gaston-obsessed ladies are too easy to win over. Similar to how the devil purposely seeks out strong, God-honoring Christians instead of the weak, wandering unsaved, Gaston knows Belle is different, and that is exactly why he singles her out. Transitioning to positive masculinity, this is embodied by men who have strength and control, but are willing to rise to the occasion if so needed. These men are receptive to advice, acknowledge responsibility for good and bad actions, and look to God for guidance. Take Daniel from the Bible. He was wrenched away from his homeland, forced to adapt to a foreign culture against his Christian values, and urged to follow his flesh. At one point, Daniel is presented with a diet that strictly goes against his Hebrew culture. Without his parents around, Daniel easily could have done as he wished, not just in his diet, but in worship, his body, and habits. Nevertheless, Daniel earnestly requests for pulse or beans to eat and water and drink, which is essentially Hebrew diet, in place of the meat and wine previously offered. His request is granted, and surely enough, he becomes healthier looking and an example to the Chaldeans, who were in control of Daniel. In time, God gave him wisdom that will challenge his friendship with King Nebuchadnezzar, who writes a law that goes against Daniel's values. Daniel knows the consequences for upholding them, but regardless of the fear and punishment looming over him, Daniel continued to find solace and meditation in God, rather than agonize over situations beyond his control. Additionally, in positive masculinity, It's a Wonderful Life presents George Bailey to reflect on. George Bailey, the main protagonist of the familiar Christmas-time movie, has the ups and downs of his life, showing his growth as a son, husband, and father. With the opening scenes of the film beginning with his childhood, he's shown playing with his friends, including his younger brother, George. He includes him happily instead of shunning him out of embarrassment. It even goes as far as to save him from drowning. As he matures, George begins to become closer to his love interest, Mary. She's a great example of a godly wife, supportive, adaptable, and agreeable. Moments after getting married, George is torn between using his dowry for his honeymoon and saving his neighbors from a financial crisis. Mary steps up before he can even think and willingly gives up her dowry to the townspeople, putting them first. She knew George wanted to do the right thing, but was still unsure, and confirmed him in his decision. The house the Bailey couple purchases is literally in shambles, yet Mary sees it as a canvas, an opportunity to make the most out of it. In the darkest point of the relationship, both George and Mary remained faithful in their devotion to each other. This positivity isn't limited to just men. Women as well can be beacons of godly feminism. Deborah, Ruth, and Hannah, just to name a few. Deborah was a woman of power in her time, being a judge of Israel. As a prophet and source of wisdom for a people, she turned to God for strength instead of herself. Additionally, she could have run all over Israel trying to find issues to fix, but remained calmly rooted underneath a palm tree, in reference to Judges 4:5. At one point in Deborah's life, Israel fights back against Sisera. Barak, who sided with Israel, who was involved in this conflict, felt uneasy about facing Sisera, but negotiates Deborah's presence to encourage him. She easily had an excuse to make fun of him, but chose to support him in this fight. Another godly woman, Hannah from 1 Samuel, shows how sorrow and suffering can turn to joy when given to the Lord. Hannah's husband, Elkanah, had a second wife, Peninnah, who ridiculed Hannah for an infertility. Now, taking Elkanah's polygamy out of context, one might assume he saw his wives as superficial. But Elkanah loved Hannah. He married her first, and he loved her even more than Peninnah. The reason he married Peninnah? Because she was able to have children. Elkanah wanted a strong child who would one day rise to take his place and care for his family. Hannah endured Peninnah's mocking, took her yearning for a child to the Lord, and vowed to consecrate her child to the temple. Even when Eli, the priest of the temple, assumed Hannah's fervent prayer was just her babbling while drunk, Hannah set her eyes upon the Lord. All in God's perfect timing, Hannah eventually gave birth to a son named Samuel, who would bring honor to God in the temple. In the words of Pastor John MacArthur, Hannah was not only the quintessential godly mother and wife, but in a spiritually cold generation, she exemplified patience, prayerfulness, faith, meekness, submission, spiritual devotion, and motherly love. Sadly, today's society has pushed toxic feminism. Some examples include Miss Havisham from Great Expectations, Mother Goth from Tangled, and Mulan. While each character is dynamic in their respective situations, they all share a common trait: dissatisfaction in where they are in their lives. Miss Havisham constantly ruminates on the fact that her husband would be walked out on her wedding day. Instead of realizing he wasn't the right man and looking for a more godly man, she let her selfishness overcome her in throwing a lifelong pity party. Mother Gothel not only refuses to marry, but kidnaps a child for her fleeting ambition and immortality. Mulan literally goes to war to prove her worth to her father, and goes as far as portraying herself as a man and lies to her own father. All these women have ambitions, but for the wrong reasons. That innate will to improve and reach for something better is tinged with selfishness and sin, thus only leading to pain. With the Bible giving a clear picture of what a family should look like, why don't more people follow it? After all, supposedly 65% of the United States population identifies as Christian. America is founded on the Bible, and Christianity is the largest religion in the world. While no church is perfect, pastors themselves aren't the biggest issue. It's the churchgoers themselves. In this day and age, we have folded to compromising for what's right, for what's in. Instead of allowing God to prune their hearts for the better, people are allowing themselves to be coddled with what their flesh wants. Simply giving in keeps people from changing and growing for the better, essentially being lazy. Having a lack of spiritual stability is one of the root causes of familial issues. Being rooted in God's word roots a family. When God is taken out of the picture, the chances of discord between parents and children only increase. Yet still, people are afraid or even upset with Christianity, believing it to be too legalistic, difficult, and unaccommodating to today's worldly beliefs. Living for Christ is a full-time commitment, but even Christ himself states in Matthew 11:30, "My yoke is easy and my burden is light." Should families be more willing to make sacrifices for their children in Christ, they can become closer not only to their children, but additionally to living a godly life. As previously stated before, giving into our flesh is one of the main problems, along with low or overinflated self-esteem. Nonetheless, this world is very imperfect, but God created each of us to specifically serve him in unique ways. His plan and will are absolute, even when they don't make complete sense to us. Sticking to his will fulfills his intended path for us. And by switching the jobs he's given us, we are not only disobeying him, but making our own jobs more difficult. Everyone is faced with different issues and challenges. Take Hagar, for instance, who was the first recorded single mother in the Bible. Being a slave, Hagar was still used by God to conceive Abraham's son, Ishmael. Through her suffering, she found joy in her child. Joseph had his little freedom taken away from him, yet still humbled himself in service, only to rise to power ordained by God. No matter how God has created you and I, we are all made in his image to glorify him. And by following his will, we become united in him. Women are called to attend their family and uphold their husbands, in reference to Proverbs 11:16. A gracious woman retaineth honor, and strong men retain riches. It is true that men and women are biologically different and better suited in unique ways to glorify God. 1 Corinthians 12:4-7. Now there are diversities of gifts, but the same Spirit. And there are differences of administrations, but the same Lord. And there are diversities of operations, but it is the same God which worketh all in all. But the manifestation of the Spirit is given to every man to profit withal. The Bible proves that women can work hard for the greater good of her family, instead of fleeting worldly pleasures. Proverbs 31:16-17. She considereth a field and buyeth it. With the fruit of her hand she planteth a vineyard. She girdeth her loins with strength and strengtheneth her arms. Some might say that each gender is actually more efficient and happy unmarried. While that may be the case for some, it's a temporary happiness. Yes, you have more freedom in your life, but there is a deep yearning, a spiritual hole that craves not just another human, but the missing piece reflecting the image of God, in reference to Genesis 2:24. Therefore shall a man leave his father and his mother, and shall cleave unto his wife, and they shall be one flesh. Just a few verses behind these passages, God reinforces the rite of passage from mere person to partner. Genesis 2:18. The Lord God said, "It is not good for the man to be alone. I will make a helper suitable for him." As you can see from the chart displayed here, our society has definitely impacted the importance of marriage. Both men and women are showing the pattern of delaying marriage, and therefore delaying God's will for their life instead of seeking after carnal, fleshly self-interest. You can also see from the chart that our society places a huge value in what we perceive as a main reason for marriage: love, when the actual reason God created marriage was to provide Adam a helpmeet and further his kingdom. Of course, there are situations simply beyond our control. Spouses die from illness, accidents, war, divorce happens, and thus single parents must take care of their family. But the biggest problem in such circumstances is the fact that single parents think they have to work overtime in their family by being more masculine or feminine, when in reality, they need a stable influence to fill in that gap that the missing spouse would have provided. Teachers, pastors, aunts, uncles, older siblings, all of these people can work together with single parents to fill the void. God is our highest Father, who will guide us alongside our children, regardless of our marital status. Psalm 65 encourages this: "A father of the fatherless and judge of the widows is God in his holy habitation." If God has blessed you with children, you are the center of their influence. If you do not take your job as a parent seriously, especially as a single one, then your children will not be serious about you, God, or love. They will treat partners in romance like a Kleenex: take, use, throw away, and repeat. With examples to better visualize a good man, the three most important values of a man are highlighted. A good man is a protector, provider, and procreator. A man is tasked with protecting something: his children, wife, family, honor. God makes each man differently suited to bring glory to him, but they all have the ability to defend truth and goodness. Secondly, a man is made to provide. His labor's effects ripple to his family and peers, not only to better society, but to have better understanding his journey with God. Men are made to rise to challenges placed before them, face them, learn from them, and teach others how to do the same. Consequently, the gaining of knowledge prepares men to teach them to their offspring, hence procreation. Both men and women are called to spread truth and goodness in the form of people. God has given both genders vital roles in this special circumstance. Women are called to bring honor with their temple, not just in having a child, but in raising one alongside her husband. This intimacy is intended to be with one man, the husband, and the husband only. True love comes from being rooted with a single partner in God. Men are called to bring comfort and encouragement to their wives in this stage of life. Childbearing isn't an act of dominance, rather a delicate dance and learning from each other, and saturating godliness and preparation for God's gift from above. When both men and women keep this in mind, a beautiful life full of joy and happiness lies in store for them. In conclusion, there's a famous song that has a verse that goes something like this: "Anything you can do, I can do better." But men and women should instead sing, "Anything you can do, we can do together." Thank you.
Good job, Grace.
Thank you.
So, a critique of your thesis would be this: your promotion of returning to more traditional roles. The critique would be that those are culturally defined roles that were that didn't allow women to pursue careers, pursue ambitious things, that they ended up kind of being relegated to a small part in society, and that really this more egalitarian society that we're living in provides opportunities for women, for females, that a more traditional role or traditional society didn't allow. How would you answer that, as far as, like, I guess to put it in simple terms, women are better off now than they were in the past, or even particularly in ancient past, when there was clearly defined roles for them, that it's better to have more egalitarian society like we have today?
So, Mr. Lockyer, I think the biggest issue women have today is having the wrong kind of ambition. I know that earlier this week, Jacob in his thesis referenced how we have two horses of reason. We have spiritedness and fleshliness. And there's nothing wrong with a woman having a job, but what it boils down to being wrong is for the wrong reasons. Of course, I think they used to look at the jobs alongside men as like helping them, and I'm doing my best to like encourage them and everything. And nowadays we go like, oh, burn the patriarchy, women need more jobs and everything, and men are always against us, but that's not always the case. I mean, take for instance making an omelet. If you make it with a rotten egg, it's obviously going to be bad. But no matter how many good vegetables you put in it, you even put in yellow dye to make it look good, you're still not going to touch that omelet, right, Mr. Lockyer? It's made with rotten eggs. It has the wrong start. You have the wrong vision.
All right. Thank you,
I think
Grace.
it's all about changing our mindset.
Sure. You mentioned that being married is part of God's will, and marrying later is delaying God's will, and that's a societal trend that's happening. What advice would you give to young women, young ladies who are unmarried, or even because that's basically our audience here, but what advice would you give to young ladies who are unmarried? Do they just wait around for a husband? What are they to do with their time, particularly, again, as the age that people get married is moving further and further. It's later and later in life, so there's going to be potentially many years, if they do get married, if that's God's will, between now and then. What are they supposed to do with their time?
So today's society has really had a big emphasis on being single is the best way to look at everything. I mean, take a look at song lyrics nowadays. It's very skewed. It's either you're better off single, you're better off breaking off with him, or it's either please just love me, please just take me, I want someone to love. It's two very unhealthy sides of the spectrum instead of just being flat in the middle. And sort of looking at marriage the wrong way, instead of just for love and carnal stuff. Yes, you can marry someone because you love them, but ultimately, the reason you marry someone, as Mrs. Carter said earlier this year, is to fulfill the creation mandate, to procreate and multiply and have dominion over this earth, to encourage God's will. So while there's obviously circumstances beyond people's control, of course, a spouse dies and you still have to take care of your family. There might be some people who live together before getting married and have a child, and they can still fulfill God's word, but it's sort of like following a recipe. You can still offer substitutes and put in other things that don't retain in the recipe and still have it turn out good, but the main recipe is what makes the dish taste better. I mean, substitutes can be, of course, used, but it's better originally following the recipe, hence God's will.
Thank you.
Thanks for that. That was very interesting. I think you probably would agree that the majority of the people here at Annapolis share your viewpoints, and one of the statements of faith of the school very much aligns with your thesis. But my question to you would be, how do we as believers, and are countercultural now because the world is moving rapidly in a different direction from our beliefs, how do we go into the mission field of the world and help people understand that this is a different way to do it, the Lord's way? How do we be missionaries on this topic? Do you have any advice for us to go out and say, this is what the Lord intended, and what you're being told isn't necessarily the way it should be?
I would say to that can you rephrase that a little bit better?
So your thesis is that God has a true plan for the family, and your argument is that the world has moved rapidly away from that. Everything in our media is different. It's saying our marriage, age of marriage is increasing because people are feeling, I can do this on my own, I don't need a man, or I don't need a man, I guess is probably the best way to put it. We all agree with that here. How can we go out into the world and help people understand that? What's your advice to that? Is it just simply read your Bible, or is there some actionable things that we can do to go out to the world to evangelize your belief of that?
Well, Mr. Riley, I think it all boils down to what you ultimately see as kind of like life. Are you just doing it to fulfill what you want and just do what you want and then kick the bucket? Or is it more so, I want to make a difference in this world, I want to meet someone, I want to be able to have a child, etc. And I think a lot of people think that marriage is, you can't have agreements, you can't be on the same level and everything. But I think Amos chapter 3, verse 3 gives a great example of how a lot of people think that one spouse has to be in front of the other and sort of block the path that they're both going on. It's very narrow. When instead, the path is just narrow enough for both of them to be walking side by side with each other and being aligned to that. So men and women are not equal, of course, physically, And I feel like nowadays people have, sort of for feminism to come in, they think, oh, we have to lower standards for women to be able to do a normal man's job, when in reality, each man and woman is made to do different things. And of course, even single parents at ACA, they can have other influences for their children to help them, such as teachers, pastors, other people in the school can help educate them for the better, instead of single parents just simply working overtime, being, okay, I'm a mom, my husband passed away, I have to be more masculine and properly raise my children. No, that's not the case. You can still be a mom, you can still be feminine, but there's totally nothing wrong with you having other positive influences in your children's life.
Okay, and do you attribute some of this decline, for lack of a better term, to one of the previous theses was the decline of fathers in homes, where divorce is a common thing, and do you attribute some of this decline to that?
Absolutely, I think so. If the father does not take his job seriously, then the mother will overbear and take over, hence toxic feminism, and the children will see that as an example and just think, oh, that's just a normal thing. It's fine for one parent to lack in their job, another one to take over, when in reality it's not the case.
Okay, super, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Riley.
I apologize first if I missed this. I heard your definition on toxic masculinity. That was very specifically laid out. Did you lay out a specific definition for toxic feminism? And if you did, could you just remind me what that specific definition is?
Toxic feminism is kind of similar to toxic masculinity, but more so in the sense that kind of like having a victim complex, like, no, I'm never good enough for you, I always have to fight for everything I want. But women shouldn't have to fight for that. They should remember that their jobs are to uphold men who are in the hierarchy of God's hierarchy, you know what I'm saying?
So toxic feminism is when women are not upholding the male hierarchy, is that what you're saying?
In a sense, yes, and they try to push them out of the picture entirely.
Okay, so to tack onto that, when you went into your examples of Mother Gothel and Mulan, those are two very different characters in my mind. One is very sweet, but still very confident. The other one is flat out villain. So how do you put both of those very different characters into the same box and claim that they're both toxic feminists?
Well, for starters, Mulan sort of took over her father's role in fighting in a war, but actually the movie is not very accurate to the original mythology. In fact, it wasn't her father being in old age, it was actually him just being sick and her wanting to take over, when in reality, she actually had a cousin named Mushu who was supposed to fight in place of her father, but instead there were reversed gender roles, and he decided to cross-dress to avoid the draft. And we can see throughout the film that Mulan is actually unhappy the whole time she's fighting and portraying herself as a man, and she only feels comfortable in her own skin and happy at the end of the film when she's a woman. So she throws things completely out of the balance to think, oh, I'm gonna be good enough for my dad, but her dad already loved her. He already loved her for being the woman that she was proud of her, she was probably gonna get a husband soon, and she fixed a problem that wasn't really there, essentially. And more so for Mother Gothel, yes, she is a straight out villain, but like I said, she had wrong ambitions from the start. She wanted it all about herself. So she gatekept Rapunzel for the entirety of the story.
Okay, thank you. One more question. When you talk about, let me find the quote. When you're talking about just a spiritual yearning to be married, you wrote, you have more freedom over your life when you're single, but there's a deep yearning, a spiritual hole that craves not just another human, but the missing piece reflecting the image of God. So with that in mind, how would you argue that to older, solidly believing women who have never been married, not because it's necessarily a choice not to be married, but simply because the correct man, spiritual leader in their life, if you will, has never been presented to them? How would you argue that to someone like that?
Even the Bible has an example of a powerful young lady who never got married or has children, or at least mentioned in the Bible. Take Deborah. She has no mention of her having a husband or child, yet she greatly helped Israel by giving advice. And instead of running around sticking her nose in problems beyond her own control, she remained calmly rooted under God and turned to Him for inspiration and as a guide. So even if you are a Christian woman who is a bit farther along in life and the right man has not come along, that doesn't stop you from being a good influence to younger Christian women or women who aren't even Christian to begin with. You can still have a spiritual influence in them and say, even though some people might not get married, you can still live in a godly manner and inspire other women to do the same.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well done. Good job, Grace. Congratulations. With that, audience, you are dismissed. What they've all been waiting for.